So I picked up this morning as I left the house this Oxford Concise Dictionary of Ecology that I bought when I was doing that Masters next door. I probably bought it from the bookshop down there that was then Blackwell's, and it's called something else now, isn't it? But anyway, I bought that and I checked up. And then I arrive here tonight and Molly sees this and says, oh, I edited that. Which is quite a nice little story, isn't it? Anyway, so thank you, Molly, for helping me through my Masters. It's very, very useful. So I looked up this morning, and it's one of those times you kind of wonder, I wonder if, I did actually pick it up this morning and thought, I wonder if actually the word ecology is in here. You can well imagine there's every other word in there. But fortunately, you put it in there, so well done, thank you. So the definition of ecology in this is, and listen to this very carefully, the scientific study of the interrelationships among organisms and between them and all aspects, living and non-living, of their environment. Say it again, the scientific study of the interrelationships among organisms and between them and all aspects, living and non-living, of their environment. Didn't you do a good job? Yeah, very good, very good. Anyway, so, is it still relevant? Well, the problem is, I would say, is in the modern era, for want of a better phrase, you could call that kind of through the modern era, the emergence of the modern era, the 20th century, and so on. I mean, of course it's still been relevant, but I would say it's not been nearly relevant enough. Because what we've often failed to do as a human species is not only understand the relationship among organisms and between them and all aspects, living and non-living, of their environment. Actually, even when we have understood it, we failed to care about that relationship. And perhaps that's been the biggest crime that humanity has had over the last few hundred years. We failed to care about that relationship even when we've known. I'll give you three key examples. The first one is it was really over 100 years ago, about 150 years ago, if I remember rightly, that the scientist Milankovitch first came to understand the beautiful thing that happens with the Earth's orbit. The fact that it goes around the sun and all these kind of things, but also every few 100,000 years, there's a little wobble in that, in how the Earth spins on its axis. And what that leads to is slight differentials and so on of the energy that we're receiving from the sun. And it's essentially that kicks the Earth in and out of warm and hot periods. In other words, ice ages and the interglacials, the warm bits between ice ages. And every time that happens, a beautiful thing happens. You know, when we go into those as we go into those cold periods, because of a reduction in energy reaching the Earth, yes, Earth gets a little bit cooler, but then there's all these feedback loops kick in as well, which means that actually you see more and more of carbon coming out of the atmosphere and going into the biosphere. So amazing things happen, like a big boost in fish stocks in the coldest parts of the world, huge increase in the abundance of fish, huge increase in carbon going in all parts of ways into the biosphere and out of the atmosphere. And then, when there's a little bit more energy coming from the sun to the Earth, and we go into a warmer period, you have all those positive feedback loops again, so that you see actually a huge amount of carbon fluxing out of the biosphere into the atmosphere. The Milankovitch cycles themselves aren't enough to explain the difference between cold periods, ice ages, and warm periods. It's that flux of carbon that goes from stores into the atmosphere, from the biosphere into the atmosphere, that makes all the difference between a cold period, an ice age, and a warm period. And the amazing thing is we've built a huge, fantastic understanding of that over this last century or so. And you would have thought that actually we would have cared about that as we came on to understand that then digging up carbon that had been fossilised millions of years before into fossil fuels, digging that up and burning it and releasing that into the atmosphere, clearly that's going to cause problems, and you would have thought we'd care about that. But as a species, we fail to care about it. If ecology was if we thought ecology as a species was relevant, if actually not only did we build that understanding but then care about that relationship, then perhaps we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now with climate change. Another example, of course, is what's happened to the biosphere, what's happened to biodiversity and the astonishing loss of nature around the world. And of course I could give any number of examples about how this has happened. So I thought I'd pick actually the most shocking one just from this week, because it's every week something comes out. But did you see this week? Warning of our ecological Armageddon after dramatic plunge in insects numbers. This is a new scientific study come out just this week from research in Germany. 3/4 of flying insects in nature reserves across Germany have vanished in 25 years, with serious implications for all life on Earth, scientists say. Imagine this. So you've got here scientists saying we're on course for ecological Armageddon. I'll read you this quote here. Insects make up about 2/3 of life on Earth. This is from Professor Dave Gorson at Sussex University. Insects make up about 2/3 of all life on Earth, but there has been some kind of horrific decline. We appear to be making vast tracts of land inhospitable to most forms of life and are currently on course for ecological Armageddon. If we lose the insects, then everything is going to collapse. Now, you would have thought that would be a slightly bigger news story, wouldn't you? I guess most of you didn't hear about it. Got reported in a few tiny places. You would have thought everything is going to collapse, say top scientists, is a slightly bigger story than some of the other things that have been in the news this week. That's good scientific work there behind that. That's in a peer-reviewed scientific journal. So the ecology was there, the scientific understanding was there, but the care, the way in which our society cares about that understanding wasn't there, and that's a problem. I'll give you another example about nature, and that is just that shocking loss of abundance. You've heard there about the 3/4 loss of abundance. Why is it that sometimes we're not so shocked about it? Well, partly it's because our own experiences, it doesn't seem to happen so suddenly. And this is because of something that scientists call shifting baseline syndrome, which effectively says that all of us as humans, we track back what is happening in nature to actually how we experienced it when we were children. So if nature seems in a poorer condition now to when we were children, then we think that's bad, you know, and we might care about that. The problem is, for all of us in this room, even Satish, the fact is that when the state that nature was in when we were children was already degraded from what it should be. If you look at the historic records, the oceans were once boiling in fish, teeming in fish. In the North Sea, do you know how big cod could grow to? Any idea? You think of cod, don't you? Fish and chips. It's about that size, maybe. If you're really lucky, you get one that big. How big can cod grow to if humans didn't exist? How big might you find cod? 3 meters. Is that 6 foot? Yeah. Sorry, what did I say? Yes. So 3 meters. Cod can grow to 3 meters. Astonishing. But it never gets the chance. It never gets the chance now. The oceans were teeming in fish. One of the most extraordinary things I talked about before with climate change, looking at historic natural climate change. One of the things that puzzled scientists for many years is working out where all the carbon goes in those cold periods, because of course you didn't have forests in the northern latitudes, they were covered in ice. The best thinking now is it went into the oceans, and the oceans were teeming in fish, cetaceans, in other words whales and dolphins and so on. They were all the most extraordinary benign carbon stores. Whales, dolphins, fish are the very best form of carbon capture and storage we have. It's quite astonishing, and it works, and it's benign. What about the other one? Well, Satish mentioned it, air pollution. You know, again, if we go back to that relationship, that ecology, the scientific study of the interrelationships between organisms and between them and all aspects, living and non-living, of their environment. What about the relationship, the non-living bit, between pollutants, particles, and humans? The fact that some of the smallest particulate matter in air pollution now, in exhaust fumes, is being embedded in our brains. What about the fact that it's causing children's lungs in this city, in London, to develop slower than they would otherwise? And just today, to use the most up-to-date references in a university, just today a new study saying that the number of people that are dying prematurely in Britain as a result of air pollution is now 50,000 people a year. That air pollution is contributing to those deaths. Ask yourself this question. If tomorrow morning on the news there was a news report that there had been a new intelligence, a leaked intelligence report that a Middle East dictator was causing the premature deaths of 50,000 people a year in Britain, how would our politicians respond? How would the media respond? Would it be number 5 on the news? Or would it be number 1? Would we, as the populace, would we be happy if the government response to it, this Middle East dictator killing 50,000 people a year in Britain every year, would we be happy if the government's response was, yes, we think this is a terribly important problem and we're putting measures in place to make sure it is reduced a little bit by 2025? Because that's been the government's response to air pollution. Oh, and it would be solved entirely by 2050, by the way. Would we be happy with that? It's quite an astonishing situation. So the problem is even when we have that understanding, we don't have the care. The reason this has happened is because as humans, as a species, we have lost very much our relationship with nature. We failed to understand we are still part of nature. We have come to consider ourselves somehow apart and separate from nature. Therefore, we don't seem to care about those relationships. But I'm a campaigner, and that means I'm an optimist, bizarrely. You have to be. I couldn't go in and do my job every Monday morning and the other 7 days of the week if I wasn't an optimist. And I truly believe that there's a very good chance that in this century, the 21st century, this could be the century where we relearn that we are part of nature. That actually for humans to survive, for humans to progress, that we have to learn again our relationship with nature. And that doesn't mean we have to sort of go and live in straw huts or anything like that. Actually, it could be the most exciting part of the history of human progress. 3 examples. There's a lot more excitement building now about the circular economy. It's still kind of a bit of a jargonistic term and so on. But this is so important. I'm not saying we're anywhere near achieving it yet, but this is so important because the whole point is that nature is built on cycles. Nature doesn't waste anything. It just constantly cycles things around, reuses, recycles, and so on. The problem is our current economy is a linear economy. It doesn't do that at all. It collects something, makes something, uses it, dumps something. That's not what nature does at all. So if we can start to rewire our economy to be a circular economy, we're just starting, finally, to mimic nature again, and perhaps there is a hope. We're a long way off from achieving it yet. But that leads to the next point, which is this really exciting field of so-called biomimicry. People learning, scientists learning about actually and studying really carefully how nature has solved some of the biggest problems and seeing if we as humans can do it in the same way and doing it in balance with nature. I'll give you some amazing examples, and there's so many, but they're very exciting how this happens. You know, bullet trains in Japan, you know, they've got those sort of rounded fronts. You can picture them. The old ones had those rounded fronts. The problem with them, and of course they were called bullet trains because they look like bullets, which in itself tells you something, doesn't it? But with those random fronts, the problem with them was that as they would go into tunnels, they would actually cause a kind of sonic wave and a big boom, and that was a real problem. It caused all kinds of problems, destabilised the thing, wasn't very nice for passengers and so on. So they tried to look at how to solve this. And then scientists looked at kingfishers. As kingfishers dive from the air straight into the river, they do this amazing thing. They go from air into water with barely a ripple. How on earth do they manage that? And so they looked very carefully at the shape of a kingfisher's beak, evolved over thousands of years to do this perfectly, and then built bullet trains with a similar pointed front as a kingfisher. And guess what? They now go 15% faster. Go 10% faster, use 15% less electricity, and don't make that sonic wave. Quite incredible. Other examples as well. The Galapagos shark does this incredible thing that because of those denticles that you get in shark skin, you know, the tiny little triangular plates, if you like, in the skin, they actually manage to swim around without bacteria collecting on them. And so scientists have now perfected this material that we can use in hospitals and places like that that mimics that shark skin and means you don't have spread of bacteria without having to use antibacterials and all the problems that are associated with that. Perhaps one of the most exciting ones is looking at coral and the recipe that's involved in how coral creates itself, how it sucks CO2 out of the ocean and locks it in the coral. Well, let's mimic that for how we create cement. So whereas cement, most cement at the moment, you create a ton of cement and it results in a ton of carbon, actually they've created a type of cement now that when you create a ton of cement, it actually sequestrates half a ton of carbon out the atmosphere. So nature has so many of the solutions to so many of our problems. And if we learn those lessons and apply them right, maybe this can be the century where we learn to live in harmony with nature. But for me, the most exciting aspect of this is that relationship between us as people and nature, and finding that again. I'm sure many of you will know this, but it's still something that astonishes me. There's been studies known for 30, 40 years now that people who are in hospital recovering from operations get better far more quickly if they can have a view of trees from the walled window. Even if they have a view from it, if they get a really good outlook into nature, they get better even faster. This has been shown in countless studies time and time again. So ask yourself this question. If the job of a hospital is to make people feel better, why is it they look like industrial parks? Our hospitals, if they looked like and actually were a lot more like nature reserves, would be better hospitals. Why don't we do that? It's because that relationship between us and nature is broken down, and we've somehow come to think that we're better than nature, we can be arrogant, and we don't need to worry about that relationship. What about people and our mental health? Huge mental health crisis in pretty much all developed countries. Well, time and time again, studies have shown that if people have access to good quality nature near where they live, can get to it and can enjoy it, then that improves their mental health. So I think with good campaigning, with a lot of mobilisation, with people coming on board, there is just a chance that this could be the century where humans learn to live in harmony with nature again. And I say this, if we manage to do that, that is not just some kind of thing that is nice to have. It's the next step in human progress. And ask yourself this question, if it's not that, then what is it? Because I don't think there's much progress for humans if we don't do that. Thank you very much.